Hi, it's me, Ingrid INFP, and this is my review of The Infinite Castle by Renaud Contini. I'm going to preface this video by saying that I'm still technically have COVID. I was affected pretty badly. Now I'm much better. It's minus 13 degrees outside, so I haven't really gone out for a while. My supervisor came to my house today to bring me some food, so that was very nice. And she brought me some hot chocolate. So I've been drinking some hot chocolate. It's on the floor next to me. But let's get into it. So I highly recommend the book. Here's the book. It's going to be backwards since the camera is backwards, but it's The Infinite Castle, and it's kind of a silky, nice cover, so I really like it. It has an infinity of castles on the cover, so that's nice. I rarely read, so that's also a disclaimer. I for some reason the capitalistic society and the lack of focus from TikTok and stuff has rotted my brain, so I never read, basically. I don't have TikTok, I just scroll social media, and when I come home from work I rarely have the time to read. So I don't have many other books to, like, all the references in the book, I don't really know the references. I don't usually read philosophy, but I have read The Stranger by Camus, and I would say that if you like The Stranger by Camus, I think that you would like this book. It's also about like a morally ambiguous character told from their point of view, and like somebody who's committed a crime and doesn't really understand stuff in the same way a normal person would, a person with the general view of ethics and such. So I think that you would like this book. I have not read the other references that Renaud himself talks about. He says here that in the back of the book, he says that it combines the angst of Dostoevsky, the absurdism of Kafka, the magic of Murakami. I've read none of these authors, but I know that my INFJ best friend has read Kafka at least, and Murakami. So I think that a lot of INFPs and INFJs would like this book. The protagonist of this book is an INFJ, and that's kind of interesting because I don't think that you'll find a book out there by an author who knows about MBTI, who consciously thinks about MBTI, and who incorporates MBTI into a book. I mean, a lot of authors will probably picture themselves an INFJ and write in the INFJ perspective. Especially if they are INFJ themselves, they'll be able to relate to the INFJ, you know. But in this case, this character is an INFJ, and it's not just a self-insert of the author. This is an alienated INFJ, a bad INFJ. So he doesn't represent a real person in real life, you know. Otherwise, I'd be kind of worried about that person. So I made a document on my phone about all the things that makes me think of all the conversations I had with my INFJ best friend, and how the protagonist of this book kind of relates to how my INFJ and I talk about things. Not saying that my INFJ best friend is in any way similar to the protagonist of this book, because this protagonist is not a great person. So first of all, he talks a lot about time. That's why the infinite castle is a big thing. The cyclical nature of time. Something like that is really interesting, I think, to INFJs. It seems that all INFJs have this thing about time. And my INFJ best friend is not an exception to that. He loves talking about time. It's kind of become a meme between us, like time is everything. So this guy has a hard time with his past, and he doesn't remember his past and what is past, what is future. The timeline of this book is confusing. And the past reveals itself in dreams. And dreams are also a thing that, well, NFs in general like to talk about. So yeah, he dreams about his past, but his past also dreamed about his future somehow. And this book doesn't make much sense. Let's just say that. Maybe it makes sense for somebody with a much higher IQ than I do, but this book doesn't make sense, and I'm fine with that. Like, it's kind of funny when it doesn't make sense. The INFJ protagonist, Mr. Lynch, also talks about how he can flip a domino and see what will happen when he flips a domino, like everything, like the butterfly effect. That is something that my INFJ best friend talks a lot about. He always describes NI as flipping, like knowing which domino to flip in order to get to this certain conclusion. And being able to visualize it all in your head. So the protagonist of this book does that too. The protagonist also talks about life being like a river, and water is something that INFJs love talking about. So there again. The INFJ is often disconnected from their own body. And you can see that in the protagonist of this book as well. It's kind of funny because, like, as an INFP, I have SI, so like I can tell when I'm hungry and such. But the character in this book kind of neglects his body in many ways throughout the book. He goes on a fast at one point in the book, and at another point he like talks to his own shoulder like they're separate. And he admits himself in the book that he has a disconnect between his body and his mind, his sense of abstraction. The present self, which is the body, and his past self or his future self, which are dreams, abstraction. He can't reconcile that. Also, there's a part, it's a funny part where he talks about walking, like he has to sit down, so he has to find a chair, and it's like becomes this really intense, like he really needs to find a chair to sit down. I think that if he'd had SI a little bit higher up, he would have figured out quite early on that he would need to have a chair, or he would have decided to sit on the floor. But for some reason, he was really determined into finding a chair. So these kinds of things just really make me laugh, because it's like the absurdity of how INFJs are able to survive in this world. I have no idea how they do it. They're so silly. Let's see. The INFJ in this book hates his memory. He hates his own memory. His memory is lost. I mean, what is more INFJ than somebody who doesn't remember anything? you know. The SI is their last function. Like most INFJs, Renaud is very verbose, and the protagonist of this book is as well. Likes talking, likes using complicated words. So yeah, it's funny, but it's hard to follow sometimes. But I like it because it makes it really interesting. Not a lot of people write in this way. And the protagonist in this book is also in a way a writer. So yeah. He also talks about being an eternal observer of life. And that is something that INFJs really are. Like, they observe, like, they're not actually inside themselves, they're just observing everything else. So yeah, in that way he really is an INFJ. Then he talks a lot about metaphors, using metaphors, and he kind of uses metaphors as a defense mechanism because he's scared. We don't really get what he's scared of, but something is not right. There's a lot about the identity, having a split identity. That's what makes him insane in the end, is that he doesn't have a full sense of identity. He keeps merging himself with the rest of the environment, of everything. He talks about the cogito, like he wants to merge. He doesn't want to have a soul. He's kind of ambivalent about this because in a way he doesn't want to have his own self, but then he's also looking for his sense of self. So he has to write to preserve his sense of identity, of being. So I thought that was interesting. He's alienated from other humans. This is not a trait for healthy INFJs. This is an INFJ who has discredited FE. He does not want to live by convention. He wants to live idiosyncratically, true to himself, but at the expense of all convention. So that makes him alienated from other humans. It also makes him alienated from the bare sense of ethics. Nothing is beyond his sense of ethics. So he doesn't really he doesn't have the conscience like some other people would, or you could say. He also has this sense of split identity because he's highly uncomfortable with talking about where he came from, his parents, his birth. He kind of just sprouted out of nowhere and does not want to think about like what led him there. That is kind of the whole point of this, that reconciling with his past. And I don't know, I feel like that's a very INFJ problem to have. I think the INFPs are kind of more have the problem that they get too stuck in the past, because that's SI. But so I found that really interesting. Also, a topic that he takes up that is important in the Infinite Castle is that the world is a simulation. My INFJ best friend is always talking about how, well, always, he talks about many things, but he always brings up the same things. It's kind of like the things that his NI and his TI have refined. And one of those things is that the world is a simulation. And it's been taken, well, both by scientists and by philosophers and astronomers and physicists, that maybe this world is a simulation by other beings, or other human beings maybe, but other beings. And there's a sense that you don't have free will. that you're just acting according to, you're also being looked at from the outside. And that's what the infinite castle is. It's a glass cage where you're being analyzed by like scientists from the outside. So yeah, that's kind of makes sense when you talk to an INFJ. You'll see the sorts of things that they talk about. It's kind of the same for all INFJs. It's kind of like the hive mind of the INFJ. I find it really fun because it's kind of like an inside joke with myself. I'm like, oh, that reminds me of what my INFJ said, or what this other INFJ said. And INFJs I just love INFJs. Okay, but I've already talked about how he's against following norms and he wants to be creative, so he wants to go outside of the box completely. He does talk about seeing the future and how that's not true, that you can't see the future. And I would agree with that, except that INFJs are always running simulations about what will happen in the future. So they can see the past as well as they can see the future, pretty much. Well, for me, it's like impossible to see what the past, well, what the future would bring, while the past is much more clear to me. He does talk about space and time, which is also something that I've talked about with my INFJ friend. We watched Interstellar together, and how time and space are correlated or not. Okay, let's see. He personifies objects, which I think is more of a thing that INFPs do. But this is an alienated INFJ who can't relate to people, so he has to relate to things. And I find it kind of cute, but it's also kind of disturbing. At a certain point of this book, the character decides that he wants to be a janitor. And it's kind of funny because he's useless as a janitor. Because of inferior SE. My INFJ best friend was a janitor, and I think that he was good at it, but it wasn't really what he was destined to become, you know. So yeah. Also, the INFJ in this book is has no idea how the world of TE like actually works. Like he prints out all of these CVs to become a janitor, and he puts them in a little pile, but he like kind of fakes his CV, but he doesn't. Like, I'm sure that those CVs are completely rubbish. Yeah, that's kind of funny. I just I pity the poor man who can't figure out the TE world. He is charismatic apparently in this book, from what I can understand. He is good at manipulation in a way. So unfortunately, that is kind of a negative stereotype of an INFJ, but they can get around not figuring out TE stuff by having FE. He has this charm, I guess. His eccentricity is kind of charming. He likes a sense of surprise, but he also likes to deceive, kind of. Even though he's not really out to deceive people, he kind of finds it funny. So that's what makes him dangerous. What's interesting is that he seems not to have lost his sense of empathy. So he can be a really awful person and still have a sense of empathy. Like he can still see what people are thinking. Like he spots an intern and he sees that she's really wants to do a good job, and so he can see that in her, and yet he's a psychopath or something. So yeah, so he has empathy, but he doesn't have empathy. Hard to say. He lives his life as a skeptic, and that's what he says in the book. He is kind of a nihilist, an absurdist. You could decide what you want. He creates his own meaning in life, but that's where he kind of goes wrong. He's suicidal, unfortunately, but maybe fortunately, because he is kind of awful. So yeah, it's kind of like he has to find ways to stay alive in this crazy world, and so that's why he is how he is. I see that he admires Essie because he wants to be a janitor, and he admires this person who is a janitor, but he doesn't have the aspects to become a janitor. There's a certain point where he hides his head in his shirt, which is so comical. Like, why would he do that? Ridiculous INFJ behavior. Anyway, he feels no boundary of himself. He has no boundaries in his glass cage, and he feels naked and vulnerable, and at the same time spread out in a weird way. And I can sense that is really an alienation. I think that INFJs can end up in that world if they're not careful. So that's all I had to say about all the different things about INFJs. It is a really good book. It's also a really fucked up book. I was planning on giving this book for my grandfather, and I am definitely not giving this book to my grandfather. Even if my grandfather is probably an INTP or something, I am not giving him this book. The reason for that is because it gets really weird. Sometime around when you've passed the middle, not the very end, but when you've passed the middle, some stuff happens, and there's some stuff of sexual nature that really, really made me uncomfortable, and I got triggered. So I am going to put that in the description that I was triggered by this book. This guy, it's not even that he's perverted, it's just he's so disconnected in every way that for somebody like me who's already a little bit icked out by sex, from the fact that I'm asexual and that I'm a lesbian, and that in general it's kind of a weighty topic for me. Reading that, I had to skip a little bit of the book because it was a bit much, and I did not really get the reason why that was included. I guess it was just the whole weirdness of it. I guess it was supposed to be that way, but it was a bit much for me. I think that this book could have been improved, to be honest, by not including a large part of the story. I think that there's this woman who's in his cage with him, and if I had written a story, I would have deleted that whole plot out, and the book would still have been great. Obviously, I don't write books, so I'm not saying that I would write that book, but if that character and that whole side plot had been deleted out, the book would not have lost any of its meaning. It would probably have been a much nicer experience to read. At the same time, this book is not made to be a good experience. It's supposed to be a little bit disturbing, like the infinite castle it is. The castle of madness, the haunted house of craziness. It's supposed to be disturbing. And I think like the first half of the book is really, really interesting and enjoyable, just like reading The Stranger of Camus. The second half, you have to kind of just go with it. I knew that I was going to get triggered. I just kept going. I actually sent an email to Renaud asking if there were going to be more triggering moments in the book. He said that I'd passed the worst by then. I was in the middle of the book. I am not sure I passed the worst, Renaud. There was still some sexual nature stuff. But I managed, I got through it with a fair amount of tears. And I think I'm stronger for it. I think I managed to get over some kind of fear myself. It made me think about a lot of things. This book was really an interesting experience. It was weirdly funny, weirdly intriguing. I couldn't really stop reading, even though I wanted to stop because I'd been triggered. It drew me in, like the infinite castle on the cover. It drew me in. So yeah, that's what I had to say about the infinite castle. My views will probably change in the next week or so. These views will change. I definitely will give it a 5 stars on the Amazon. Not a lot of people have read it. I haven't read Renaud's other books, but I think I need a pause from this book. I'm a little bit worried about having this book on my shelf because it kind of makes me feel queasy, but I can't give this book to anybody, you know? This book is an acquired taste, you know, you could say. Not an acquired taste, it's just, it's not for everybody. And it kind of disturbs me that I'm the audience for this. Because I did love it. So I don't know what it says about me that I like this book. But I like this book even though I did not understand it. And even though it was messed up and fucked up, it was a book that really made me think, that made me laugh, that made me cry. And it's not a book like many others. Also, it includes a French card, a French talking card. And since I'm part French, that this book was made for me, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, I highly suggest you buy this book. I got it with the help of my subscribers on YouTube. Thank you, everybody, for having me buy this book. Thanks to Dulles and to Carm and to Jan, whoever you are, and to Jay. Jay, you might find a character called your name in this book. Maybe. And also, I did recommend that you buy this book. if I can't find anybody to give this book to, maybe I'll send this book in the mail to somebody, if you want. Yeah. Tell me what you guys think. Maybe you're thinking about buying this book. If you have any other books of this kind of nature to recommend, yeah, have a great day. Bye.